Streets of Rage, the legendary beat-em-up franchise that arguably didn't just bring the arcade brawler experience home, but by the second entry, surpassed it. Holding these thoughts, it is no wonder that people are so obsessed with these games, with it seeming some would do anything to have experienced the fourth game in the series during the 90s or noughties. This was the reality we lived in during the 26-year time frame we were waiting for Streets of Rage 4 to materialise. However, for some, rather than just wait, they would go much further and create all new Streets of Rage experiences from home. The effort, believed by many to be the very best of these, is an epic title known as Streets of Rage Remake, which despite being a fan game is often considered the greatest Streets of Rage game ever made, period, even topping the quality of the official entries in the series. Not just that, but since the last time I covered this game on the channel, it has received significant updates and improvements, enhancing this fan-made classic and pushing it to even greater heights. So with all of this said, hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is why Streets of Rage Remake got even better. The fan project that changed everything. Yeah. The world of video games has always been an environment where only the fittest survive. The speed of evolution in the entertainment medium, from the popularisation of Pong in the 1970s up until today's ridiculous games, has been quite frankly insane. We've certainly come a long way in a very short time. To go from games that look like this to what we have now in just a few decades almost feels like a work of science fiction, and as quickly as the early 90s you could argue that 2D games not only looked genuinely beautiful, but gameplay had been refined enough to deliver quality experiences that many of us would continue to go back to for a lifetime. But as awesome as sprite-based works of art were late last century, a lot of ignorant individuals didn't actually appreciate the awesomeness we had at our disposal. Instead, as swiftly as the mid-90s, many fans, journalists and industry insiders considered sprite-based gaming to be old hat, and instead were fetishizing ugly early polygon games. To be fair, they rightfully were claiming gaming's future to be specifically 3D polygon focused, which in the short term at least indeed did turn out to be true, but not for the long term. Take the present we live in today for example. Amazing quality sprite-based games are fortunately released quite frequently, with many believing we are living through the beat-em-up renaissance period. This has meant we have got to experience amazing games such as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge and the simply stupendous Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons. Many believe that the crown jewel brought forward in this revival era was the long-awaited release of Streets of Rage 4, a breathtaking beat-em-up that in my opinion at least fully lives up to the level of hype surrounding it, delivering a timeless and unforgettable experience matching the best the franchise has to offer. I can get you a massive 60% off of this game right now, reducing the price down to just $10, and I can get you many marvellous modern games for even cheaper than that. Experience this instant classic right now and get up to 90% off of thousands of other great games by using my affiliate link via the pinned comment. I save hundreds of dollars every month by taking advantage of these sorts of deals, and you should too, so happy shopping. Between the mid-90s and mid-2000s, 2D gaming had horrifically, practically died out. As a result, by the time the PS2, GameCube and Xbox era was in full swing, 2D gaming experiences had pretty much become restricted to handhelds, and the release of a Nintendo DS even threatened that stronghold. This 10-year period in history was all about the refinement of polygon gaming, and as time went on it seemed like 2D gaming experiences might end up dying out altogether. Building on this sad turn of events, the rare game that did show up with sprite-based graphics would usually get lower review scores, with the old visual style often being a reason for the unfair criticism. Fortunately, as bland as this era was for 2D gaming, in my opinion this dull period in mainstream gaming led to the retro gaming boom, and later the many indie hits we can play today that are a million times more enjoyable and engaging than a lot of AAA experiences. The thirst for more of the old style only got stronger, the less games of the old style began to be produced. Even back then, many gamers grew sick and tired of playing the same AAA tripe, and by the time the Xbox and PS2 were popular, immense swaths of gamers had already turned back to their 8 and 16-bit consoles. These consoles delivered the high-quality gaming experiences that the industry simply wasn't providing at the time. What made this revolution all the cooler is that enthusiasm for older games did not simply end with collecting and playing the games of the past. The progression in technology began to allow fans of these old games to create ROM hacks and fan games based on the 2D properties they knew and loved. Over time, with the shift in market forces chasing technological advancements, the release of a new Streets of Rage game seemed increasingly unlikely. However, like with many retro games, Sega fans' love for the Streets of Rage series never diminished. Various fan projects would pop up over time, further pronouncing this. One early example we have talked about on here before came out in 2003, a game known as Beats of Rage. Initially released by Senile Team, Beats of Rage is a fan tribute to Streets of Rage, replacing the original graphics and characters with resources taken from the King of Fighters series. The game, which was made just for fun, surprised its developers as over 1 million people downloaded and played it, a huge number considering the game wasn't even advertised and was discovered through word of mouth online only. This interesting game has a unique history which I may cover in more detail down the line, but today it's all about Streets of Rage Remake, a game that began development the same year Beats of Rage hit the internet. Speaking of 2003, while many people, such as myself, had already turned our attentions back to 8 and 16-bit consoles of our childhoods, we were unfortunately still in a period in history where the world of gaming was very much almost exclusively an ugly, bland 3D polygonal hell. So it's no surprise that Beats of Rage proved so popular, as this was around the time I and many others began to massively hunt for old games to fill our gaming needs. Considering all of this, the timing was perfect for Bomber Games to begin work on the Streets of Rage Remake fan project. So let's discuss the early development phase of this legendary fan project. Streets of Rage Remake was created by a Spanish developer who goes by the internet handle Bomberlink. Unlike many fan projects involving ROM hacking or using assets from other titles, Streets of Rage Remake was made completely from the ground up. To quote Bomberlink regarding this game, it does not use reverse engineering, nor a single line of code from the original games. It's all based on the visual interpretation. To put the scale of this undertaking into perspective, although work began on this game in 2003, it took 8 years to complete. Streets of Rage Remake was painstakingly created to include graphical improvements over the originals, completely new features not included in the original saga, fresh new scenarios, characters, remixed music, game modes, and even a store where players can unlock extras. But as impressive as these implementations are, these new features are just the tip of the iceberg. However, as massive and impressive as the results have been with this one, its creation hasn't arrived without big controversies. It's no secret that large corporate entities usually dislike it when fans infringe on their intellectual property, whether they profit from it or not. Nintendo, for example, is infamous for getting fan projects pulled and many fan games cancelled via simple cease and desist notices, often years before they get close to completed. While this may be the case, throughout history, Sega has generally taken a less conservative approach, in most cases allowing fan communities to experiment and go wild with their intellectual properties, including the iconic Sonic the Hedgehog. I think most of us would agree that being frivolously protective over copyright is sad, unnecessary, complete loser behaviour, and fan work for the most part only make brands even better. Take how Sega have handled Sonic the Hedgehog fan projects, for example. Sega in the past have been so impressed with fan efforts that they employed a fan project lead in the form of Christian Whitehead to direct Sonic Mania, a title some consider to be the greatest Sonic game released by Sega in many years. Without fan projects, Sonic Mania simply wouldn't have existed. But sadly, they didn't give Streets of Rage Remake the same leeway, and unfortunately, Sega took a different approach. After the game had been in development for 8 years, Bomberlink finally allowed it to be downloaded on PC in the year of 2011. Just days after its release on various downloads and torrent sites, Sega attempted to get the game pulled. Their first stop was on Bomberlink's own downloads. On the game's official forum, Bomberlink stated, "Sega has contacted me regarding the download posted on this site. While this issue is being resolved, please do not upload the game for others to download. Any links posted on this site will be removed." Wired.co.uk contacted Sega for a scoop on this situation, and Sega responded, stating, "Sega is committed to supporting any fans that take an interest in our games, and where possible, we do so by involving them in beta tests and other development marketing research opportunities. However, we need to protect our intellectual property rights, and this may result in us requesting that our fans remove online imagery, videos, or games in some instances." While companies are perfectly within their rights to do this scenario still came as a shock to Bomber Games, as the title's development had been no secret and heavily publicised online for 8 years. Sega had never before asked a fan to cease the creation of a project, so this all came as a big shock. Building on this story, according to the game's FAQ, Bomberlink's crew notified Sega of the game's development many years before its release, and Sega did absolutely nothing to prevent it. So this raises the question, why did this happen? Well, it is thought that Sega's sudden change of heart and protectionist behaviour around their IP was driven by the release of Streets of Rage 2 on iOS that same year. Conspiracy theorists have even gone one step beyond this too, believing the mobile release of such a game was a direct response to the traction Remake was gaining. Fortunately, while Sega were attempting to screw us all out of our entertainment, once a fan project is out in the wild, it's out in the wild. Once it's out there, there's little anyone can do about it, not even greedy, nasty Japanese businessmen. Now that we've covered some of the controversy surrounding this one's arrival, let's discuss more about the amazing game they tried to deprive us of. As mentioned right at the beginning of this video, this critically acclaimed fan project has received a major update since the last time I covered it. In my opinion, making it better than ever before. Released back in 2020, version 5.2 of the game marked a significant milestone in the evolution of this adventure. With approximately 300 additional bug fixes, tweaks, gameplay improvements and new features, this latest version offers a richer, more immersive experience than even previously. One of the most notable upgrades in version 5.2 is the inclusion of full 16:9 widescreen support, a feature that brings a new level of depth and clarity to the game's iconic environments. Whether navigating through the main game or delving into Streets of Rage Remake and mods, the action is more vivid and engaging than ever. Building on the enhancements, the soundtrack has also received a substantial update, featuring 15 new tracks from BGM 1401. These additions include both remixes and original compositions, offering players a fresh auditory journey alongside the familiar rhythms of the past. The game's visual presentation was also overhauled, with new scenes and updated graphics permeating every aspect of the playthrough. From an all-new intro to enhanced endings, main menus and shop graphics, the aesthetic upgrades contribute to a more cohesive and polished narrative. The AI in the game has also seen significant improvements as well, offering more challenging and balanced gameplay. This refinement ensures that each encounter feels more strategic and rewarding. Moreover, version 5.2 introduces a new achievement system, motivating those who pick this up to explore every corner of the game. On top of all of this, the redesigned menu layout, complete with submenus and new options, enhances navigation and user experience. Players can also choose between the remixed or retro original soundtrack, allowing gamers to customize the soundtrack according to their preferences. Notably, new scenes such as the water fountain provide fresh settings that enrich Streets of Rage Remake's atmosphere, all in all providing us with more reasons than ever to appreciate this epic effort. As for the game's story, in this title, Mr. X maintains his role as the main antagonist, illustrated throughout the game's opening animation and text, establishing the basic story. Before Streets of Rage 4 burst onto the scene with the return of Adam and its rich lineup of playable characters, Streets of Rage Remake brought him back first. In fact, all 6 characters who starred in the original title appear once again, as well as the range of unlockable characters who we'll be discussing shortly. Away from a larger player selection from that of the originals, the story in this game is not linear, allowing players to choose from multiple different routes. The route chosen determines which level players can play through to eventually reach a showdown with Mr. X. This concept was briefly explored in Streets of Rage 3, where gamers play through different levels depending on their achievements in the last few stages. It's amazing to see this concept massively expanded upon here in this girthy fan serving. Long-term fans of a series will instantly notice that each route draws inspiration from the original trilogy, but it has all been remixed and rebuilt into something that feels fresh and new, yet at the same time nostalgic. In terms of other new features, the game includes bright and bold colours, just like all of the previous official installments in the series. However, unlike the official games, this installment includes the option to display blood in combat, making this entry a little more gritty for those who are into that sort of thing. For those who prefer a more traditional experience, lucky for them, there is an option to turn this feature off. However, the ability to toggle blood is just the beginning of the game's rich customizability. In an act of awesomeness, players can switch between bare knuckle and Streets of Rage themes, apply filters like scan lines, adjust transparency and more. The game includes all sorts of bells and whistles to let you experience this game in the best way that suits your tastes. Speaking of the epic customization options, even the gameplay itself is completely customizable, allowing players to tune their playthrough to match their preferred playstyle. Think of this as similar to the groove system in the Capcom vs SNK games, but with even more options at your disposal. Players can choose the difficulty setting, the number of lives they start with, whether players can damage each other in combat, and more. There really is a wealth of different choices to experiment with. As for the combat, it offers a range of possibilities too, including different jump types, meter types, combo types, weapon types, and even the combos themselves. Luckily for those looking for something more straightforward, the game has default options, making it easy to jump into the game without feeling overwhelmed by choice. While one could argue that all the customization could upset the game's balance, this experience is more about fan service and celebrating the franchise's history rather than prioritising anything else. The game can be set up however you like. As one would hope, with a title that proclaims itself to be a remake, the game still features many gameplay elements harking back to its predecessors. It contains various enemies from the previous installments and mixes in a few new ones to deliver a fresh yet familiar feel. When it comes to playing this one, like in all Streets of Rage games, practice makes perfect, and these villains can be disposed of through memorising patterns and footwork techniques. The enemies are scattered across the game's many branching paths, offering an absurd amount of replayability. The branching nature of the game has a number of advantages, as apart from providing a challenge, the paths lead to a huge amount of different endings for the player to discover. Whether a player survives or not exploring one of these routes, points are awarded that can be spent in the game shop. Here of course various unlockable content is made available. In my opinion, this feature arguably makes Streets of Rage Remake even more playable than any of the official entries, with a range of fantastic unlockables available to find years before Streets of Rage 4 even hit the market. I must add that some of these unlockables are absolutely insane, and amongst the extra content, even a new set of play modes can be found, such as a boss rush mode and a survival one. Adding to the fun, there are also silly GoldenEye style cheats that can be unlocked, such as giving characters the ability to fight with freaking lightsabers for example. The rest of these unlockables offer up even more characters to control, including hidden characters from Streets of Rage 3, like Roo the Kangaroo, Shiva, one of the game's villains, and even the infamous Ash, who was banned from the international version of Streets of Rage 3 due to concerns over him being too gay.
I've never come over a little queer.
So it's amusing to see the same burly bear back in the game whom the cowards who made Streets of Rage 4 were too afraid to include. But if you're looking for something beyond simply a bit gay, the unlockable characters don't stop there. Amazingly, Streets of Rage Remake includes a few characters who had never been playable in the franchise before, such as the game's main villain Mr. X, who wields a machine gun, an alluring dominatrix named Ellie based on the Electra sprite from the previous games, and Rudra, a completely new character created from scratch for this title. You can play as all of these characters and more in this ultimate Streets of Rage experience. As one would expect, each of these characters is selectable during cooperative play, but what else is cool is that another first for the Streets of Rage series is that the game also includes cooperative play where the CPU controls the second player. Like everything else in the game, the CPU player's playstyle is also customizable, offering up even more choices, which seems to be what this game is all about. There is so much to do in this one and to tinker with. Just to further give you an idea of the sheer size and scale of this game, there are 103 different phases to play through. However, as we know, Streets of Rage is about more than level design itself, and no Streets of Rage video would be complete without talking about the music. Most would agree that composer Yuzo Koshiro's music within the Streets of Rage trilogy is considered some of the best ever found within a video game. Epically, the soundtrack of this remake features fantastic remixes and rearrangements of some of Koshiro's best ever work. As illustrated hopefully throughout this video, the brilliant reworking of the game's music is a joy to the ears. And it was fantastically created by Gecko Yamori, Kali and BGM coders who all did a fantastic job here. Going back to the game's aesthetics, most would feel that the graphics are probably a slight step up from what the 16-bit Mega Drive would have been capable of, but it still feels in line with the classic series. This, in fact, makes me wish someone would find a way to port this game to the bloody Sega Saturn, as it would certainly make a fine addition to that platform's library. The same goes for Sonic Mania 2 actually. While we've already covered many elements of this feature-rich game, let's talk about another. One more unlockable fixture in this game is the Streets of Rage Maker feature. This mode allows users to create, edit and design their own levels with a maximum of 8 levels and 16 scenes in each. For the design in scenes, many fans recommend using the FPG edit program from the company Codemasters when doing this. Though if this doesn't sound like something for you, you can download mods made by fans, thus increasing the game's appeal perhaps further. The Maker feature of this game has certainly resulted in even more great fan projects. There is just so much to enjoy and be awestruck by when experiencing this game. As for the level of detail put in, it's truly tremendous. Take for example the fact that this game includes 64 artificial intelligence modules for CPU controlled characters, improved collision and damage data, improved animation and improved cartwheel and grip systems. This is way more than a simple remake. There is now also autosave functionality, extended actions to suit 6-button controls, the addition of weapon specials and the return of the police call originally seen in the first Streets of Rage game but dropped in later installments. The game is deeply extensive in what it offers players and is perhaps the most impressive fan project ever undertaken. In fact, calling the game a Streets of Rage remake is slightly misleading and does not give this project the full credit it deserves. Remakes like those found in the Super Mario All-Stars pack feature the same gameplay with completely remade graphics, certainly making those games remakes of older ones, but the same description cannot be affixed to this title. Streets of Rage Remake, on the other hand, is more of a full reboot or reimagining of the older games rather than something that has simply been remade. It is not at all fair to refer to this title as a remake, because no title like this has ever existed before. This is an almost completely new experience, simply with callbacks to older games. Thus meaning, this whole scenario reminds me that I am still triggered by the fact that in 2020, Square Enix released a game titled Final Fantasy VII Remake, when that too was completely different from the entry we received in the 90s. Remake was a full-on reboot. What is it with developers not knowing the difference between the words remake, reboot and remaster? They all clearly mean very different things, and reboots take the most work, so devs should wear such labels with a badge of honour in my opinion. But regardless of how you label this game, there is no denying how fantastic it is. The game really is that special, and in my opinion, arguably the ultimate Streets of Rage game in existence at this point. Just wow. Don't forget I can get you a huge discount on Streets of Rage 4 and up to 90% off of thousands of other amazing games too. I can even get you massive money off of Final Fantasy VII Remake, a game I believe to be thoroughly excellent no matter how little I agree with the titling. So happy binge shopping, I hope you find loads of irresistible offers for you. Cheerio!